Hello to all the comic fans, Marvel geeks, and all the nerds in between. Welcome to another episode of Vigilante Vibes podcast, where we talk all things Marvel along with other fandoms, but without the toxicity that's taken way too much space in each and every fandom. I'm your host, Megan Nicole, and today I have a very special guest, the incredibly talented writer, Joe Gray.
Thank you very much. I appreciate being on today.
I'm so happy you're on. We've been talking back and
Thanks.
forth for so long, and we finally did it.
Yeah, it took us a few to get going, but we're both pretty busy. I mean, you have kids and I have work and writing. So yeah, I'm glad we finally got it together.
Me too.
And I enjoy your podcast, by the way. I go to the gym and I'll pop it on and I listen to a lot of things.
Thank you. It makes me happy to know that when, someone is just dying on the treadmill, they're listening to my voice.
Well, I'm not dying that hard, trust me.
I don't go that hard either, and I'm still like, this is the end of my life, but that's okay. So why don't you tell us a little bit about you?
Well, I've been a reporter, an editor through the newspaper business for more than 25 years now. I've taken that direction. It's funny because when I was a kid, I always wanted to be a reporter. I never wanted to be like an author or a book writer. I just wanted to be a reporter. And then once I became a reporter and I enjoyed it, and one of my favorite things to do was write feature stories. And I enjoyed that a lot. I like telling the stories. And then one day I just decided to write a book. And the book I was writing, and I'm still writing, was based on some of my experiences as a journalist in a small town newspaper. And I kind of created the main character kind of loosely based off of me and some of my experiences. But that story is about a reporter that realizes 5 years after this young girl was murdered, no one solved the case, and even the newspaper kind of forgot about it. And a 5-year anniversary is a big deal. So he decides he's going to look into it again. He starts uncovering all these different things, and a lot of things happen in his life, and it gets crazy, and he meets these people that could be the killer, and there's all these things going on. Well, I still haven't even finished that book, but I've been working on that for a long time, and I get sidetracked. Well, one day a friend of mine had published a book on Amazon on his own, and I liked the idea, so I had a short story in the hopper, and I started writing more of these short stories, and they were sort of romance novels. The actual name of the book is Unrequited, 5 stories of tragic romance. Mm-hmm. So they're not really totally love stories, but they're not terrible because everyone yelled at me because they all ended horribly. So I had to create...
Well, they're tragic.
They're tragic, but I never got mad that read them before I published. I had some beta readers, mainly my family, and they were all upset because they all ended kind of sad. So in the book, I created an epilogue. But while that was going on, I met this family. A friend of mine, Liz, was a trainer at my gym, and she had a nephew born with hydrocephalus, which is you get excessive water on the brain. It doesn't fluid in your brain drains down to your spine. Down through your spinal column. I don't understand all the science, but that's basically what it is. Well, his brain wasn't doing that. And when children have that, their heads get bigger and the brain swell. So they need a thing called a shunt. They put it in the brain and it comes down and alleviates it. Well, he was just a few days old, and him and his twin brother, that was Josh, and his twin brother, Jake, were premature and they had some issues. Jake was totally fine, but Josh had this condition. And I followed their journey. I Facebook friend their mother, Emily, and I followed their journey, and they did hydrocephalus fundraisers, and I got involved and things like that. But I just started thinking about all the stuff Emily was posting about the care Josh needed. And I thought it might be a good idea to write a story about that. And I associated it with Christmas, and the title of the first kids book I wrote was Jake and Josh and Canceling Christmas.
Right here, for those interested.
Oh,
yeah. It's actually
available on Amazon.
Yeah, it's actually my daughter's favorite one. She is.
Oh, I'm glad you liked it.
She is so into it.
Oh, that's really nice.
Yeah, we've read it quite a few times.
Yeah. And that whole story is basically Jake and Josh, the twin brothers, are babies. And Josh is feeling bad because his care requires so much time. And Christmas is on, and they got to do even more work. So they decide to cancel Christmas. And they go on these little escapades to try to do it, and they end up varying degrees of success. But ultimately, they end up realizing it's about family and care and love. And it's really not, Josh isn't a burden. It's just a different kind of care he needs. And all kids need care, as you know, as a mother, you know.
Yeah.
And I include my niece in there, who's now an adult, and I'm feeling old because she's in her 40s. But she was born with spina bifida, and she's paralyzed from the waist down, and she also required a shunt. And so in the book, she makes an appearance, and she can understand Josh as a baby because I call them shunt buddies, because she has a son, he has a shunt. And she's the one that helps him understand some of these things. And then Jake, along the way, talks with his grandmother a little bit about Christmas and the meaning of Christmas, and that all kind of comes together in the end. So that's that first book.
Yeah, that's so cool to know that Liz was actually your niece, because I was wondering, like, who is she? Like, how do they? How? It's so cool that you had
Yeah.
someone in there that could understand. Just for everyone knows they're babies in the book, so they can understand each other, not everyone else.
Yeah, the
can't
family
understand
can't understand that.
Yeah,
But
and
Nicole
then,
comes along, and they meet in the mall on Christmas Eve,
yeah,
and she can understand because of the shunt. So I referred to them as shunt buddies as a way
yeah,
to explain to the children when they hear the stories.
so cute.
And the thing about that book, I learned a lot about publishing. I went through a company called Ex Libris, and because I can't do art, so I had to have somebody do the art. And they gave me a decent deal on the art. But the problem is when you go through one of these companies, is they control the pricing. So there's been some issues with that. So the book's a little more expensive than I'd like, but I can get author copies less expensive, things like that. And it's cheaper to buy on Amazon than through their website.
Mm-hmm.
But when I did that, they had basically it was a buy one, get one free offer to do a second kids book with the art. So the second book, which is called Jake and Josh and the Blanket Rescue, I wrote that in less than a week. And
It's this
then I
one,
had
people. Yeah.
then I had to do some refining with the book and things, but it took me about 3 weeks to get it down. And
Wow.
that one was just a throw it. I had no idea what I wanted to do with it. It was just, I'm getting it, might as well do it. No one ever reads it, no one likes it, who cares? Well, on that one, the boys are a little older, and I wanted to include Jake more because I learned from talking with Emily, the boy's mother, and Liz, their aunt, that sometimes I hate to say the word healthy, but the boy without the conditions or the sibling often feels left out. And they feel that the other children, the child with the disabilities or the conditions, are getting extra.
Yeah.
And even though they don't understand it all, they can feel left out. So I wanted to include Jake. And there was a story his mother told, and she went on Facebook. Jake had this little blue blanket they got from a diaper bag or something, or like this diaper kit, and he loved it. Well, he lost it, and the kid lost his mind, and he was upset. And Emily went on Facebook, the mother, and she asked all these people, anyone have a blanket like this? I'll pay you $50. I don't care. I'll drive to your house. Because he was losing his mind. So that was the basis of that story. And what I wanted to do was add characters. So on that book, I included 3 children of women that I worked with that I really like and respected because they were really good colleagues and they were nice. And I wanted to include their children because I liked their kids because they seemed, I don't want to say cartoonish, but they seemed energetic. They seemed like
Animated.
characters. Yeah.
Yeah.
And Milo, the youngest one, Jenny was the woman I worked with. Unfortunately, I no longer work with any of these 3. But she posts pictures, and he was just the cutest little baby. He's like kind of chubby, had this great look. And then Milo, to me, was the coolest name you could put in a kid book. So I asked permission, and she allowed me to use Milo. Ella is my longtime friend, Nicole, coworker, and she moved on, and I actually hired her within my company. Had her daughter, and always posted pictures, and she was a little fashionista. She always liked to dress up. And seeing her story on Facebook that way, I thought she'd be a perfect addition because she was so bright and she liked to read. So again, I asked permission. She let me use her. And then there was Corrigan, or Corey. His mother actually edited my romance novel, Dion, and was this lady I worked with, and she was so much fun because her and her husband would post all these pictures of Halloween where they do costumes and the kid gets involved and they're going places, and he was just seemed so energetic, and he was this photogenic little kid. Excuse me. And he seemed like so much fun. And I met him a couple times. She brought him into work, and he was this, like I said, this is a fun little dude. So I wanted to include him. So I used them all, and then I came up with the idea of this blanket. They're going to go find this blanket for him. And then I, of course, had to come up with the moral of the story. And the moral of the story is Jake was felt his security came from the blanket. And along the way, they run into these obstacles, and each child has a fear. Like Milo's afraid of the dark. Corrigan, he's afraid of heights. Now, he likes it when his dad throws him in the air and plays with him, but he's standing on something tall. He gets a little nervous. Uh, Ella, she's afraid of lizards. And so each along the way, the other children help him overcome these fears by explaining them or just being there for him. And in the end, they all think Josh is really brave because he doesn't seem like he has any fear because he went through all this hydrocephalus stuff. But he explains he went through all this because he's got the love of his family and friends. And in the end, Jake has to make a decision on whether he's going to keep his blanket or not, because that's his security. And I'm not going to spoil the ending, so you guys can go on and read it. But one thing I did enjoy about this book is they were pretty young when I did the book, and I didn't really know their full personalities. But I left Josh as a little crazier one. There's a scene in the book when they're sleeping and they wake up. And Jake's bed is neat, tidy, and his toys kind of place well. And Josh's bed is destroyed. His feet are hanging out. There's toys everywhere. So it gives them personality. And then now that they're older, I think they're 8. They're going to be 9 soon. They're a little somewhat like that. Josh is a little. I don't want to say crazy. He was a little excited. They're both excitable boys who play sports, which is really nice. But Jake's a little more serious, and he's a little more. I guess serious isn't the word. So I'm really glad I kind of nailed those personalities a little earlier. And that's kind of where I went with those books. It's really, they were just trying to be lessons about family and friendship and learning to rely on that.
Plus the awareness you're raising for what Jake has. It's Jake.
Josh. I'm sorry, it's hard to confuse. They're both J's, but Josh has the hydrocephalus.
Yeah.
And it also caused some cerebral palsy, and he has limited use of his arm, but he still plays sports. He plays baseball, he plays soccer. He's very active, and it's really good because I think having a twin and Jake is so motivated to play these things helps push Josh to him too. So it's really nice to see.
Yeah, I really love it. I like it normalizes something that happens with families far too often, but it normalizes for children because they don't understand it if they see someone different or don't understand what a shunt is. And that's what I really, really appreciate is that you're bringing it down to their level. So say my daughter goes to school and meets someone and a child says, I have a shunt. She has no idea what it is, but now she will understand it more.
Oh, that's good. You know what I found amazing about these two boys is Josh goes to regular school and that in regular classes, but he also has some classes where they have other special needs kids. And some of these schools, like at one of the schools they went to, they bring out all the kids get up on stage for graduation and stuff, and they have children in wheelchairs and crutches, and there's like a lot of support in the school. And I haven't been there, but I've seen the videos that the mother posts and the pictures, and it almost brings a tear to your eyes because you see they give. I don't know if you have kids, you probably know a lot of schools give end of the year awards and things, and they like to include. And these children, they don't exclude them. Mm-hmm. All the kids are there. They don't have a special thing for the kids with special needs. They're all the kids, and it's so nice to see because they're teaching these kids. Everybody's, we're all people. Everyone's different, but we're all the same as far as human beings go. We deserve that respect, and we deserve to be included. And these schools do that, and that's part of some of the motivation behind these books is because I'd see these pictures and these videos that Emily would post of her children, and they'd be getting awards, and you'd see them up on the stage, and there'd just be kids who are perfectly abled and some that have disabilities, and require wheelchairs and even crutches or braces. So it was nice to see that. So I think that's what I tried to get through, especially in the second book, when I included more children, that they're just kids and they're having fun and it doesn't matter. So
I think that's beautiful. More schools should be like that. Just, you see it too often. They're like, oh, special needs award show, special needs this and this. And it's like, I mean, they're still kids, Well,
I'm much older than you are. When I was in school, they had a special needs classroom. They didn't even call it special needs. They didn't really tell us about it. We just knew there was kids. Some were developmentally disabled, some were physically disabled, and they put them all in the same room. And they didn't even have lunch when I was in elementary school with us. Like they did their own lunch. They did like we rarely saw them, and you'd see them once in a while in an assembly or something, but we didn't interact at all really with them. And and you grow up learning, and sometimes you feel uncomfortable. I hate to admit that sometimes like when I was in middle school, I don't think I can remember anybody that had severe disabilities in my middle school. And when I got older, my niece was born when I was in ninth grade, and she was paralyzed from the waist down. So I got used to that, and I used to babysit her, and she had different needs and that. But I can understand why some people may be uncomfortable in situations because they weren't raised to deal with that. But now, in the past 30 years, that's gotten so much better. Like I said, this school, it's in the Utica's community schools in Michigan. Utica is a city in Michigan, but I don't recall the name of their particular elementary school, but they include everybody. And I know Josh is in regular classes, but once in a while he goes in for special help on certain things. And the extent of that now, Emily doesn't post it as much, so I don't see where he's at, but he is doing great things. I talked to Liz, his aunt, at my gym now and then, and she tells me all about him and how the things they're doing and how they play sports. And so he's definitely included, which is really good. And the kids are it's just part of life now for them. And unfortunately, in my generation, it wasn't that way.
No, it was about the same when I was younger in elementary or middle school. We did not see that class. We just knew it was the SPED class, the special education class. We did not know anything about them. We saw them in assemblies. We might have seen them walk to their class after the bell rang, but
Yeah,
that was it. And you don't really realize how damaging that is for kids to understand what's going on with them, and for that class to interact with other people and to feel like they do belong. So I
oh,
get it.
exactly.
It I'm hoping that it does change more in the future. I mean, I've talked about before. My daughter's in one of those classes, so
Yep.
and you can definitely see that they are treated very, very differently from other kids. I mean, as they should be, because they have very different needs, but they are still kids just as much as the other kids are.
Well, you need to treat them differently as far as how they learn,
Mm-hmm.
uh, how they, maybe even transportation wise in schools, those things. But when it comes to socialization, common conversations, they just need to be, everyone needs to be treated the same.
Mm-hmm.
I grew up in a time in Detroit when there was this thing called white flight, and they started busing in Detroit, and all the schools were integrated because there was sections where all the kids were black, and there are sections where all the kids are white, and they mixed them. And in my neighborhood, we lived in the north east part of Detroit, and we were near suburbs, and a lot of the people in my neighborhood, their families got scared, and they took their kids and put them in private schools or moved them and used addresses from other communities to get their kids away because they didn't want to go in school with black children. I don't know. I remember my dad telling me other people, and my dad worked at a Kmart where he was one of the, not one of the, it was probably about 20% black employee or white employees. So he didn't care. Like, he didn't care. My mom worked at another Kmart. It was the same thing. So they're like, you're going to school. Like, nobody cares what color these people are.
Yeah.
And to me, that normalized. Like, okay, I was in kindergarten when they started this, and I remember they bussed in a lot of black children. And one of my best friends in kindergarten, never forget it, his name was Lavotis. He lived way on the other side of Detroit. We never talked out of school because it's too far, and we were both in third grade. But I knew him for 2 years till I went to a different middle school in fifth grade. But he was one of my good buddies.
Mm-hmm.
And he had red hair and freckles, and I had red hair when I had hair and freckles. So I think that's how we started our friendship. But he was this great kid, and I always viewed him just as another kid. And unfortunately, in my neighborhood, there were some other kids who didn't. And I had a good friend in middle school named Sean who introduced me to comic books. That's how I began my love for comic books, and he was black. Well, after school, was on a different bus district than I, and he came home on a half day to my house, and we read comics and hung out. And I remember some boys in the neighborhood told one of my best friends at the time that they shouldn't hang out with me because I hang around black kids. And he didn't care. He was a good buddy of mine, and we just remained friends. So it's like anything. When you got a good friend, you don't go to the same school. He meets a friend at school. He might be a little jealous because he's got another friend, but it wasn't because he was black. And fortunately, I had good friends that didn't care, and it just was normal to me. So, and then I remember going to college at Oakland University and running into people who didn't get any of that interaction with other races or ethnicities, and it was a little awkward for them. But to me, I just really feel blessed that I was able to do that, and I also feel blessed that my I hate to say blessed because you don't want to say my niece having paralysis is a blessing, but I feel fortunate that I was able to deal with that situation at a young age and understand that she was different in certain ways, but she was also an extremely loving kid, and she was sweet and wonderful. And this may be my bias, but she literally was the cutest baby ever born. I wish I had a picture of her when she was a baby. She was adorable. And so those are the things, you subjugate yourself to that, and you open up to those things, and you learn that people are people. And if there's discrimination against whether it's your race or your disabilities, you got to get past that. And that's one thing I really tried to push, especially in the second book, Jake and Josh and The Blanket Rescue, is that these kids look at each other, and that Corrigan, he's a black young man, and Ella's a girl, and the other ones are boys, and they don't look at each other like that. They're just buddies hanging out, helping each other out. And that's the kind of message I was really hoping to come through without actually saying it. You just read it, and that's normal. There's just kids hanging out. There's a girl, there's a young black child, there's white kids, there's a kid with a disability, there's a little baby who's a little younger than the other ones. Everyone's accepted. And I'm not overtly saying, well, you have to accept that, but you just read it and it becomes normalized. And I think that's an important message in my long-winded explanation of that.
No,
So,
it's especially in this day and age, it's nice to see someone else agrees with inclusivity and
yeah.
everyone is just human. You don't have to say you can't hang out with this person, you can't be around this person, I'm judging you for this, for something that is completely out of your control, like skin
Yeah.
color or gender. It's nice to see someone else like that.
Yeah, I don't know, you just have to, it has to be normal. When you open a comic book and you see, like when I was a kid, Captain America and Falcon was one of my favorite comic books. I always enjoyed team-up books.
Yeah.
And the funny thing is, Sean, the boy I told you about, well, he's an adult now, but he was a boy then. He got me into comic books. And Captain America was his favorite character, and I liked Falcon. And when we would like pretend on the playground, he was Captain America and I'd be Falcon.
Mm-hmm.
And he was black and I was white. Captain America's white, Falcon's black, and we didn't care. It was just fun. And I had one of the Mego Captain America and Falcon dolls, but I didn't have Captain America. I just got Falcon because my buddy got Captain America, and I wanted to be Falcon, so I got the Falcon one, and we, play with them at school, and I don't know, you're a kid, you just do, oh look, we're doing this, and but so that's how I have to normalize it, and you just do it, and you just don't talk about it. Like you don't have to beat people over the head and say, look, I've created this character just because I want this diversity. I want to. You just show it as normalized.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what's great about the comic book medium. You look at it, and even sci-fi movies and TV and things like that, Star Trek, and it's just normal. You watch an episode of Star Trek while they touch on these kind of themes, people being together and solving problems together is just normal. And I guess that's what attracted me to that kind of thing.
Yeah, and I mean, your kids shouldn't have that level of perception where they're like, oh, he's black. Like kids don't see
Yeah.
it that way. My
They
daughter
don't.
doesn't. They just see another kid. And that's how it should be. Amongst
Until they're told
everyone.
differently.
Yeah, exactly. Until they're taught differently, which is insane to me.
Yeah, that's why that's what I really try. I hope comes through in the Blanket Rescue book, because it's like I said, there's a little diversity in there, but I don't talk about it. I don't have any kids say, hey, you're a black kid, why are you
Yeah.
hanging out with us? Or, oh, you're a girl, you shouldn't be here. I don't know, they're all just accepted. Now, of course, when you're a little boy and you get a crush on a girl, you act weird and things like that. That's a whole different story.
Yeah.
And you notice the difference then. But when you're kids and you're playing, nobody cares.
Yeah.
That's what I hope comes through in the Jake and Josh book, along with the themes of family and overcoming fear, is what I'm hoping for. So
I really enjoyed it. It was a fun like a little kid's adventure mission, and it had some pretty deep moments, and I really enjoyed it.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. The funny thing is looking at the two books, it took me longer to write the Christmas book. And if going back, I do like them both.
Mm-hmm.
And but I kind of like the Lake of Rescue a little better because it's a little more adventurous. The kids are older. There's more things they can do, and it's not as limited to in the Christmas book. It's they're on these missions, which are the same. I mean, they're doing different things, but their goal is the same. And this one, they have one goal, but they run into different situations that they have to like settle on, if that makes sense. And there's more characters to play off each other, so that's why I kind of think I enjoy the second book better, even though it took me less time to write. I guess that makes sense.
No, it makes total sense. So, moving forward, you're going to continue with Josh and Jake's adventures?
I'm not 100% sure where I'm going with that yet. I have that novel to finish, and then
True.
the unrequited stories came out a little better. And getting back to that real quick, I don't want to eat up all your time.
No, you're fine.
When I wrote that book, my friend wrote a short stories on Amazon, and I had this one story in the hopper. In the unrequited, there's 5 stories of what I call tragic romance, and the first one is about a man who is in love with a married woman. And that story came about because, like, through my life, I've had crushes on women or girls when I was younger that had boyfriends or were married. And yeah, it sucks. And oh, God, this is terrible. But when you're younger, it's the end of the world. You know, when I was
Yeah.
15 years old, I had crush on a girl at school and she had a boyfriend. And it was the end of the world. Well, I'm an older man and I was, several years ago, I was interested in a woman. I found out she was married. I let it go. Okay. I was interested. She's really nice. And I'm a grown man. I'm not going to cry about it. But somehow it got me thinking about when you read stories about women who pine after men, and you hear these stories, and they, like you read an advice column and say, this guy, I was dating him for 10 years. He said he was going to leave his wife and never did. Now I'm lonely, and, I'm at home, and he's there doing this stuff on Christmas, and I'm by myself. And I thought, well, what if we swap that? Like, what if the man is the one who's waiting? Now, in that story, the woman doesn't lead him on. He kind of builds a lot of things up in his own head. He falls in love with her, but he's the one on Christmas. He has this big, beautiful family. He don't want to be with him. He wants to be with her, and he's using social media to see what she's doing. He's upset and he's depressed, and that story tells his story. So that's how that started. And then when my friend published his book of just short stories, I said, I'm going to try self-publishing on Amazon, because getting a traditional publishing deal is very difficult now. And when my novel gets ready, I want to be able to publish it, and I'm most likely going to go self-publishing. And with all these options now for being able to self-promote, that might not be a bad idea. So I had to come up with some other short stories. So I came up with one about a boy who, the babysitter, has a crush on a babysitter. And that is 100% based on me and a real story. Now, I didn't have a babysitter because I had older siblings who watched me. So I never had a babysitter hired in. But my sister, and if she watches this and her friend watches this, maybe I'll be embarrassed. I don't know. Her name was Amy Farmer, and I had a huge crush on her. She was about 5 or 6 years older than me. I was 7 or 8, maybe. And I thought she was the greatest thing on the planet Earth. And I loved her, and I just had all these dreams about saving her from pirates or whatever. And I don't remember all the details. And I still remember her and the name. I remember what she looked like. We're friends on Facebook now, so maybe I'll post this and she'll see it. But but I had this huge crush on her, and that's kind of what I based that story on. The boy in here is a little older than I was, I believe. And, that's one story. And then I wrote another story. It was based on reality about a young woman who is teaching older adults learning math because they're trying to get either better jobs or go back to school for things. And she's about 24, and she's going to get her master's degree, and she wants to get a doctorate in math and become a college professor. And this is the idea is based on something. I went back to school for a while because I was thinking about getting a teaching certificate. So I had to take some math. And the instructor was this young woman who's 24 years old. She was very attractive. And there was a man in there who was in his mid-30s. I wouldn't say constantly, but he hit on her quite a bit. And it was to the point where like it was getting uncomfortable. So
Mm-hmm.
after class, me and this other woman, this other student, she was a woman, we'd wait and walk with her out to her car. Now, we don't think that this guy was going to do anything, but
You
we
never
figured he'd keep
know.
asking her out. So we just, like this woman in my class, I can't remember her name. She said, "Man, we should stick around." And I said, "Okay." So and she was a really nice lady, a teacher. And I can't even think of her name. My brain is going away as I get older. But so I use that as the basis of the story about a woman who becomes a teacher and gets involved with another student. And then, like the guy in the class, she was interested back and they have this relationship. But of course, tragic romance, bad things are going to happen. And then the other two stories are sort of based on things I've known. Like there's one called The Nice Guy. He likes this woman and he just keeps going for her and she just keeps rejecting him. But she decides to give him a try because he's a nice guy. And things go south there too. Uh, that actually is based on a conversation I had a good friend of mine named Dan, and just a quick side note on the babysitter story, I named him Daniel after my friend Dan because he donated money to the Hydrocephalus Association. So I do that sometimes. I'll name a character if people donate to hydrocephalus.
Aw,
And
that's
as a
nice.
quick side note, Hydrocephalus Association, if anyone's interested, you can Google and find them. They are bringing awareness to this condition, which is very underfunded. But anyway, nice story. So in this, Dan and I had this conversation about being nice guys and stuff, and he told me a story. He liked a woman, and she says, "I'm looking for a guy who treats me like you do, who takes care of me like you do, who spends time with me, who listens to me like you do, but just not you. I wish I could find a guy just like you." And he said, "Well, you did find a guy just like me. It's me." But I don't know if he was, I mean, he might have embellished that a little bit, made a joke, but I always took that as funny.
Yeah.
So that last story I wrote was about that. And then the one story is about a young man who's kind of I hate to call him a loser, but he's a loner. He doesn't have a lot of friends. His parent, and he's a multi-millionaire, and his family, his dad's putting pressure on him. And he meets a young woman who's an artist. And I based those two, Roderick is the young man's name, off of my old friend Steve, who was one of those artsy guys. All his friends were into drawing comic books and they're into anime and things. And he is the basis. His whole persona in my head when I envision him is my old friend Steve. And I told Steve about it. And he said, and the woman that he begins to fall in love with is named Rena. And she's a Filipino woman. And I base her off of a woman I knew in college named Rena, who I actually liked a lot when I was in college, but she was another one that had a boyfriend. She had a fiance, and we just remained friends, even though I was hoping for more. But, you have to respect the fact that she had a boyfriend. But I based her off of her just because, I had fond memories of our friendship in college. So I just wanted to include her. But that's how all those stories came about. I got them all together, got them edited. I asked my friend Dion to look them over, and then I published them. And that actually, people liked it. And I had a friend of mine, again, another personal story. I dedicate this to Lisa, a girl I had a crush on in the fifth or sixth grade. And because I had to dedicate it to somebody. So I dedicated it to her. And I sent her a copy of the book. We're Facebook friends. She lives across the country from me. And she told me that it was pretty moving to her because not just by the dedication, but some of the stories because of it related to some of her personal issues. And while I don't like to make people feel bad, I'm glad that people could relate to what I wrote. I guess is what I'm saying. And again, some of the things I say about disabilities and broken romance and then associating with people, I don't mean it as I'm being cruel, but I'm just trying to bring that into real life and tell a story.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. And it's great that she found a way to be able to relate to your story, too.
Yeah, she sent me a letter and said she couldn't get through some of it because it hit close to home on some personal issues. But like I said, she was Lisa, and she was my first. Well, I guess Amy Farmer might have been my first crush, but that was the older girl. But my first real crush in school was Lisa and she was just somebody I thought was the greatest, and she was the one that I actually had the nerve to try to ask out. It just didn't happen because we were in middle school. Everything's awkward and we're all dumb. And I probably said something incredibly stupid. So, it's,
Well,
So,
this has been so much fun getting to know you and getting to look
yeah.
behind the stories. Uh, Personally, I think your books are 10 out of 10. No
Oh,
notes.
thank you.
The kids ones are so much fun to read. The adult one I like because I'm into the tragic stuff. I like when it's sad, so it worked really well for me.
Well, when you read through it all, you got to, anybody who reads that one, you got to read the epilogues. Because I wrote the stories and my sister yelled at me. Things just ended. Everybody's upset. That's okay. So I added, not everything ends perfectly, but there's more to the story and some things look more hopeful, I guess you might say. And I'm going to go back, actually. I want to go back and pick up on a few of these characters and write more. The teacher one, I definitely want to expand on because I took her from one situation, blew her entire life up, and put her in a whole different situation. And in my own head, I want to see where that goes because I felt that's the one that I think ended the best out of that group. But that's the one I really might expand on.
I'm excited to see that.
Yeah, that might be a while because I got to get this novel done. It's killing me. Self-editing is terrible. If anybody wants to edit a book for free, just give me a call.
I'm sure there's so many people are looking for that job.
Oh, editing is so hard when you edit your own stuff. I'm using software and stuff like Grammarly and things to help with that. But problem when you're a writer, you edit, and as you're editing, you're like, oh, this stinks, and you rewrite it. And like, well, I rewrote this, and I got to rewrite that. Oh, what did I say in this chapter then if I rewrote this? This book has literally I've been working on it for 15 years.
I would be so tired.
On and off. Well, I started it 15 years ago, didn't touch it again till about 2017.
Okay.
And that was, 8 years ago. So I took about 7 years off, and now I've been slowly getting through it. So.
Oh, well, everything works out when it's supposed to.
I hope so.
So
my goal is to get it done this year, but we'll see.
well, please keep us updated. I would like
Well,
to know. So, where can our listeners find you?
Well, I'm trying to create some other avenues like a YouTube page and that, but right now the best way to reach me is through Twitter or X, and I'm at @author_Gray, Gray, on Twitter. You can always reach me there. And I do have an email address I can share. If anybody needs to email me or have any questions, it's simply author Joseph Gray at gmail.com. So it's author Joseph Gray, Gray, at gmail.com. And that one's my author email. You can get me through there. Twitter might be the best. I take direct messages if you want, if there's any questions. My books are all available on Amazon. That's the best place. The Unrequited, I self-publish through Amazon, so that's the only place you can get it. So if you go on and you just search for Joseph Gray or the titles or Jake and Josh and that, you'll find them. So, but I appreciate you guys taking a look at them.
Yeah, and whoever is watching or listening to this episode, just look under the episode at the show notes, and you will see links to all of those, so you can easily find Joe and find his work.
Thank you. And if anybody in the Nerd Haven group want to direct message me through Facebook, that's fine as well.
Perfect.
That's a wonderful group, by the way. So everybody who's watching this that is not part of Nerd Haven, go on there. There's excellent conversations. It's a lot of fun, and everybody enjoys it. It's just so much fun to be there.
Aw, thank you. That makes me so happy. It's a lot of work, and sometimes you just want to punch
Scream,
a few of the members, but that's okay.
Well, it's the internet, and everyone's going to be perfect, but there's a lot of fun discussions. Yeah. You put up a question, and people answer. And
yeah.
I like it because people just ask you right out, hey, what's your favorite thing about this? And people will go, yeah, this is what I like. And
yeah, it's
a lot really enjoyable.
It's so to the point, and I really do like that. There's no just beating around the bush. It feels like everyone's comfortable enough to do that.
And I like the fact there's a lot of good artists on there, and they feel free to share their work.
Yeah.
And some of it's amazing. I look at this stuff, and I was like, if I could do that, I could just write and animate my own comic books. I couldn't draw a stick figure if you gave me the head, the legs, the arms, and the body.
I would make the stick figure look fat, but like these people are making these beautiful works of art. I'm like, why are you only posting it in here? Go everywhere with that.
Oh, yeah. And there's a gentleman there who writes his own Spider-Man stories.
Oh, yeah, TJ.
TJ, yeah. And they're really good. So it's just a lot of fun in that group. I enjoy it tremendously. And the moderators do a good job of keeping the fighting down because sometimes things get a little weird and you just
Sometimes there will be a post and we're all talking because all the moderators and admins talk together every single day, and we're like, so do we put this in? Or I'm like, sometimes we're just like, let's just see what happens, and usually it doesn't go well after I say that. So but I always
but
see what
yeah.
happens.
Yeah, but it's a really good group. It's a fun group. The moderators are all really nice. The nerd the memes meme haven. Excuse the other
Meme
one's
Haven,
pretty
yeah.
good too. I like that one too because you see a lot of funny things in there, and so it's kind of good. But the main one, the nerd haven, anybody who's interested in a good time, just to enjoy anything nerdy. It's not just comic books or movies. I mean, there's talk about regular like non superhero movies,
Yeah.
science fiction. So it's just a good place to just get your nerd on, I guess.
Yeah, whatever you nerd out to, we want to nerd out about it with you.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So, thank you so much for joining me. You're welcome back anytime. You were an absolute
Oh,
pleasure.
well, thank you very much. I appreciate it. And I really appreciate the opportunity. And again, anybody who's interested in learning more about hydrocephalus,
Mm-hmm.
the Hydrocephalus Association, just Google them. They're on, I believe it's hydroassociation.com or .org. But you can Google them and find all this information about them as well. It's an outstanding organization. The funding for hydrocephalus is very low. And in
Mm-hmm.
fact, it wasn't even recognized by the government for years as something to. I don't know all the terminology, so I don't want to misspeak. But there was recognitions it didn't receive, so some of the funding wasn't there, and I know they're working to correct that. So it's a wonderful group, and they do a lot to help people. So
Yes, and if you would like, I will include a link to it as well in the show notes so people can easily access it.
I'd appreciate that. Yeah, that'd be
Of
really
course.
nice.
Of course. Well, thank you for listening to this episode of Vigilante Vibes. Wherever you're listening, click that subscribe button so you don't miss any of my amazing guests or any future episodes. Thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed it. Have a marvelous night.